Hey everyone, and welcome to the third episode of the Korean War. I am Mike B, and today we're going to be doing a follow-up video to the first two videos, and it's going to kind of get us into the actual start of the war. But this is actually a pretty important video that I thought would be good standalone. You'll be able to understand it a little bit better if you've seen the first two episodes, but it's not necessarily required for this one if you know what the Korean War is and that it actually exists. So we're going to be going through kind of the starting lineup for North Korea and South Korea in 1950, right? And I'm going to give you a little bit of a back story that kind of goes back a year before 1950, so it's 1949. And that's through 1949 and 1950, the Soviets were pretty continuously and steadily supplying mostly equipment and supplies to North Korea because they didn't want to send a lot of troops there, because if things kicked off and they engaged in direct ground combat, you know, they could risk getting into a direct war with the United States, and Stalin was smarter than that and didn't want that. So they sent a lot of equipment, and for them to send equipment to a place like North Korea was pretty significant because they had a lot more land and problems to deal with in Eastern Europe and in the stands, or before they were the stands, but in that area. The Soviet Union grew very fast after World War II. And they had all of these resources that they needed to spread out, but they still managed to spread some to Korea because that was a country that could expand communism, so they supported that. So that's a very significant thing. And these numbers won't really sound like a lot to you, but when we kind of put this into perspective, you'll understand why it's significant. During this time, China is also providing a lot of manpower to North Korea. So they ended up supplying two entire former PLA divisions that were mostly made up of ethnic Koreans, whether they were born in China to ethnic Korean parents or actually Korean born and then fought with the PLA and all that stuff. They were sent to Korea to support the North Korean Army, the Korean People's Army, which is always fun when they say that, People's Liberation Army, the Korean People's Army. Kind of a communist thing if you haven't noticed that. Republic and People's. So yeah, the Soviets were mainly doing equipment, and the Chinese were mainly doing manpower because they could. They were a lot closer, and they had the manpower. So the 164th and 166th PLA divisions were sent there around 1950, and through the rest of the year, the numbers kept growing. They'd send like a battalion here, a company there. So we don't really know exactly how many troops the PLA sent, but they were actively sending troops. The PLA's 156th Division was reorganized as the Korean People's Army 7th Division. If you know anything about the Korean War, it's a little foreshadowing. But, you know, this isn't the patch for the Korean People's Army 7th Division. But anyway, we'll get there. By mid-1950, almost 70,000 former PLA troops were in North Korea and part of the Korean People's Army. So this gave the KPA more numbers than they would have had otherwise to a significant degree. Now, let's take a look at the starting numbers. First of all, we're going to do just the general population via a census that was taken in 1949. The population of North Korea was 9,620,000, approximately, right? It's a lot of people, right? Population of South Korea, or the Republic of Korea, 20 million. Well, you'd say they've got more than double the people there. What's the problem? Well, the North Korean Army started with 20,000 troops organized into 10 infantry divisions, 1 tank division, and 1 Air Force division. Okay, that's a pretty impressive military force. 274 T-34-85 tanks, Soviets, 200 artillery pieces, presumably Soviet, 110 attack bombers, 150 Yak fighters, I don't know what model, 35 recon planes. So that's just the invasion force, too, in case you were wondering. In reserve, back just kind of watching over North Korea, is 114 fighter planes, 78 bombers, 105 T-34-85s, and 30,000 more troops. So we're looking pretty good. Now, the South Koreans, they have 20 million people total in their census, right? They're very ill-equipped and not really that disciplined military at that point. Consisted of 98,000 soldiers, of which 33,000 of those were support and 65,000 were combat. No tanks, because the U.S. said no when they requested them. So they had no tanks. 22 planes, which were mostly like recon and trainer aircraft, and 200 to 300 U.S. troops stationed in Korea. Oh, the U.S. did supply some small arms. I forgot to mention that. And the U.S. had a large amount of troops in Japan. But South Korea at this point, it's not looking too good if they were to be invaded. And it's I forgot to mention too before we get into the end of this video, both sides did have a small navy with some small cruisers and small gunboats, basically, that they mainly acted as seaborne artillery for land forces and stuff like that. So when you see these starting numbers, it's going to really, really illuminate what happens next. And what happens next, I know, but you might not know, is a very, very, very catastrophic thing for the peninsula, and it would change the course of history, including Western world, forever. So we'll save that for the next video. I figured I'd keep this one kind of a standalone so these videos don't get too long. So if you want to just, learn about one thing, you can, and you don't have to watch an hour-long video. So anyway, that's all I've got for this one. If you hear the starting numbers, you kind of look at them and be like, oof. If you ever played video games or strategy games, North Korea is definitely OP as hell at this point. It's like a level 50 army going against a level 4. It's not really looking like it's gonna end well for the Republic of Korea. Anyway, thank you for watching, everybody. If you like this video and you're learning a lot and you want to support my work financially, you can via 2 options, Patreon and becoming a channel member on YouTube. So either method of support is really cool and it allows me to do other videos and other content like I do, like shooting videos, ballistic tests, which cost a lot of money, and just allows me to do content and get things that I wouldn't otherwise be able to do just funding out of pocket. So $5 a month or more on either platform gets you into my Discord server, which is pretty fun, I think. I learn a lot on there from my Patreon supporters, which is pretty cool. And it's fun in there. But yeah, that really does help if you want to do that. If you can't support the channel financially, I totally get that. It's not an issue. Just make sure that if you do like my stuff, you just like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and share this video around if you thought it was interesting and some other people might enjoy it or learn something from it. And that really also supports the channel heavily, so I would appreciate that too. So, with that being said, hopefully this video stayed under 10 minutes. It's kind of something that it's a goal of mine to keep these videos under 10 minutes, but I keep ranting like I am right now. We'll see you on the next episode of the Korean War.